Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to be doing something very interesting. It's a little bit long, but it will certainly be worth the time. We are going to be installing MySQL using Docker. After installing MySQL Server, then we are now going to be using MySQL client to connect to that installation. Afterwards, we will now be adding some content to our database with MySQL clients. Then after our database is filled up with some data, we are now going to be building a .NET application in the front end. That .NET application will now be connecting to the containerized MySQL server, which is residing in containers, and we'll be accessing data from that database. So it's a little bit, it might be a little bit longer than the usual videos, but something interesting. So we have database, we have an application communicating together, and the database is not natively installed. It's running on containers. So the database is in a container that is active. So without talking too much, let's go straight to it. Let me open my Git bash before sharing my screen. So I'm opening Git bash. And now I want to share my screen. Yeah, as I said earlier on, we want to install MySQL. Yeah, and this is something we've done in the previous video. We saw how we could install MySQL in the previous video. So let me just make a little change, a little modification. In my container name, let me change this to, let me see. Let me change this to MySQL hyphen Shola. Let me use Shola as the name. Then the port mapping, so port 3306 in my own computer is being mapped to port 3306 in the container. Then we are restarting on failure. Then we are starting the daemon. Then we also have environment variables we are setting. And I will be changing my password, the admin password, to okay, sure. So that's the admin password, and I'm also using the MySQL image. So I think we are good to roll. Yeah. So it has created, my container is currently running, and this is the container ID. To confirm that the container is running, I can use Docker PS, and we can see the container is running, and we can see the port mapping from my computer to the container. So we have this running. So what we now want to do, in the previous video, we saw how we could access this database by entering into the container. But what we are going to be doing now is we do not want to access it from the inside. We want to access it from the outside. So we want to use MySQL clients. So if you are in a Linux environment, you can install MySQL client, sudo apt install MySQL client, and you just need to make sure that this port 3306 in your own computer, it allows you to, it's not being used for something else. Else the port mapping might not work. So what we are going to do is, I'm on Windows and I do not want to use, I do not want to run my Ubuntu on Windows environment. So I would rather use the MySQL, I think it's a bat file that I installed, the MySQL installer. Is it a bat file? I think so. So I'll just open MySQL shell, which I'll be doing now. So let me stop sharing this and I would share my SQL shell. Yeah. So what we now want to do is we want to connect to our MySQL database server from the outside, from my computer, just to be sure that whatever application that we are going to be building will be able to talk to the database because the application will be in the front end. So let me share my shell now. Yeah, so this is my SQL shell. You have access to it the moment you install the MySQL installer. You have this shell installed as well as MySQL bench and MySQL server and so many other tools that you can use to work with your database. So I want to connect to it now. So what I will do is I'm running this command, I'm connecting because it's in my local computer, I'm using localhost and I want to be prompted to enter the root password for the root user. So let me just take note of the password again that I use. So I used Frankly Ayoshola as my password, which I will be entering now. So they're asking me to enter the password, which I will do. So Frankly Ayo Shola, and I should be in. Yeah, so I do not want to save the password. Yes, so I'm in now. I'm into the I've been authorized, I've been given access to the database. And you can see that the default port for 3306 is what is in use. If I wanted to specify the ports, I would have used hyphen capital P to specify the port. But because I mapped it to the default port, there's no need to specify a port. So this MySQL shell is using JavaScript. I do not want to use JavaScript. I want to use the default MySQL command. I want to run the default MySQL command. So I'll be changing that. For me to be able to change that, I will be using hyphen SQL, and I'm now able to run my SQL commands. So what I'll be doing next now is I want to create a database. Afterwards, I will be creating a table in the database. So let me create a database. So create database. Let me call it Frank DB. I'm calling my database Frank DB. Yeah. So now the database have been created. So now I want to use FrankDB. I want to use my database, and this has been done. Now I want to add content to my database. I'm creating a table now. The table have the following columns: course ID, course name, and the rating. The name of the table is course. That has worked. So let me add some data to my um Let me add some data to my table. Let me go to, I have the command in a notepad. So because of time, I'm trying to copy them and paste them. Yeah, so this, I've added um a column to the table, data to a row rather. So I'm adding another. That has worked. So let me just add the last one. Yeah, and that has worked. So to confirm, we can all from course. So the capitalization from course. Yeah. So we can see that the content we added was truly added. So what I want to do now is, so we are in the MySQL shell now, but what I want to do is I have an application. That application, I want the application to be able to communicate to this database. So the application will be able to fetch data from this database. Note that this database is in a container. It is running in a container. I need to always emphasize that it's running in a container. So I'll be going to my Visual Studio now to show us our application. So we already created a similar application, but what we did was that application was connected to a database hosted on Azure. That was why previously I used, this was the package that was added, system data.sql client. But the only modification I made to this was instead of using SQL client, I'm now using MySQL client, and I'm using mysql.data.mysql client. That's the module that was added, the class that I'm using. So basically our DB source is fine, our user is root, our password. The password I use, let me just confirm from my Git. So the password is frankly Ayoshola. And the database is, let me confirm the database name so that we wouldn't make any mistake. FrankDB. FrankDB is the database. The password is frankly Ayoshola. Let me find out again. It's truly frankly Ayoshola. Good. So this is not, it's not a good practice to add code sensitive credential, access credentials like password and this information into your code. And in our previous videos, I already showed you a better way of handling this. But because I wanted this to be as fast as possible, and we are not doing security now, just for demo purpose. That's why I have this written this way. So as I said, from our previous video that connected our application to a database in Azure, an SQL database in Azure. The only difference is that instead of SQL client, I'm now using MySQL client. So I just added MySQL client everywhere I had SQL clients, and that's basically it. And you'll be able to work with your code. So I'll be running the program now. Hopefully, we do not have any error. Then another change I made was that our builder, so the parameters that are in the builder for an SQL connection is quite different from what works with MySQL. So I looked through the documentation for MySQL and I replaced these parameters with what is applicable to MySQL. Yeah, so that's basically it. I'll be running it now. Hopefully, our program works as expected. So let me run this. Uh, Then I will be sharing my browser if the compilation doesn't give any error. So let me share my browser screen. I'll be sharing my browser screen now. Yeah, so let me go to my browser. Yes, and now you can see this data, which was gotten from our database. We can see them here. Just to make you know that this is really working and it's not something that is hard coded somewhere. So I would make a little modification. I will make a little addition to our database and we're going to see if it will be reflected here. And this MySQL is running in a container, not in my computer natively. So let me go back to our shell and I would add, so let me share my screen for my shell, MySQL shell. Yeah, so let me add a new course. Let me call this course FE for Frankly Ayo. Let me call this 903. Then instead of Azure, let me call it Docker Data Engineer, and let me call it 4.9. Okay, so let me insert this. It has been inserted. So now let me stop sharing and let me go back to my browser. Yeah, you can see we still have 3 here. Let me refresh this and you can see it's okay. I forgot to change the ID to 4, but you can see that it has been added. It's now 4 data. So this is really a database that is working. So it's one of the strengths of Docker. So even without, I actually do not have any MySQL server running in my computer. I don't have anyone installed. So the only one that is currently working is in a container. The moment I stop the container, I will not have access to the database anymore. So it's very interesting. It's something that um, containerization is a skill that you should be involved with and build competencies around. Even apart from the job market, apart from it allowing you to get a job. In terms of your own personal use, you are going to find it very, very handy. A lot of times I've tried installing applications and the dependencies were giving me issues, but when I just get the Docker file, the Docker compose file, and I run it, the application is running in seconds. So that's the end of this video. If you find it helpful, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Have a great day.